The sky over New Delhi was dark, almost unnatural. Clouds swirled in shades of gray and violet, twisted by winds that carried a strange electric hum. Rain had begun to fall in thick sheets, mixed with sparks that danced along the air like fireflies. Streets that usually buzzed with hovercars and pedestrians were nearly empty, save for a few desperate souls clutching umbrellas or dragging malfunctioning vehicles through the puddles. Avery Lynn pulled their coat tighter and quickened their pace. The small apartment building ahead of them looked like a lighthouse in a sea of chaos, lights flickering, doors shivering under the storm's power. Avery had left work late tonight. An engineering review had run over time, but even so, nothing in their schedule had prepared them for a storm like this. The air smelled of ozone. Every time a spark of lightning hit somewhere near, the ground seemed to tremble, and a metallic tang filled the lungs. Avery cursed under their breath and scanned the street. Most hovercars had grounded themselves. Others were being swept sideways by gusts that could toss a small person off their feet. And then they saw him, Darius Kane. He was leaning against a small hovercar, one hand on the hood for balance, the other shielding his face from the driving rain. Avery recognized him immediately, boss, company CEO, untouchable in their eyes and everyone else's. His expensive coat was soaked through, shoes already squelched with water. Normally, Darius walked with a kind of confident precision, a man who seemed untouchable, untiring, and always in control. Now he looked human, vulnerable. Avery hesitated. Their first thought was, "Stay back, he's your boss. Don't interfere." But something in them overrode the thought. The storm was worse than anything seen in decades. No one could survive out there without shelter. "Hey! You need help?" Avery shouted over the roar of wind, stepping closer. Their own coat offered little protection, but the motion of moving seemed necessary. Darius glanced up, startled, then nodded. "Hovercar malfunctioned! I can't get home in this!" he shouted back. His voice carried the authority Avery had always feared, but now it was tinged with exhaustion. "Come with me. My place isn't far," Avery said, pointing toward the glowing entry of their apartment building. Darius hesitated, his eyes scanning the storm as if judging whether trusting Avery was wise. Finally, with a curt nod, he said, "Lead the way." The walk was treacherous. Wind threatened to throw them off balance, and rain hammered against their faces. Sparks of plasma danced in the storm clouds above, a constant reminder that New Delhi's weather domes were failing under the strain of climate shifts. Avery gripped the railing along the elevated pedestrian bridge, guiding Darius through the chaos. Once inside the building, the warmth hit them like a wave. Holographic screens flickered to life, scanning for any anomalies. The building's AI quietly informed residents of the storm's status, giving updates on air pressure, wind velocity, and estimated duration. Avery and Darius shook off water, leaving puddles on the floor as they hurried toward the elevator. "You live alone?" Darius asked, his tone cautious. It was the first time Avery had ever heard curiosity in his voice instead of commands or assessments. "For now," Avery replied, pressing the elevator button. "Not much, but it's safe from storms like this." The ride up was tense. Darius didn't speak much, but Avery could feel the weight of his gaze, not judging, but assessing. There was a strange honesty in it, stripped of boardroom politics. When the apartment door finally closed behind them, Avery breathed a sigh of relief. The hum of the storm was still loud, but the walls, the ceiling, and the small comforts of home offered a fragile sense of safety. Darius leaned against the doorframe, water dripping from his coat. For the first time, Avery saw the man without his suit of confidence, without the veneer of perfection that made him untouchable. "I didn't expect anyone to survive outside," Darius said quietly. It wasn't a boast, a complaint, or a command, just a simple acknowledgement. Avery nodded. "Storms like this are rare, but not impossible," Avery replied. They gestured toward the small seating area. "Sit down. Dry off. I'll make something warm." The apartment was small, filled with the usual clutter of a young engineer's life: work tools, scattered notes, a small shelf of old books, a half-assembled drone in the corner. Avery moved to the kitchenette, flipping a switch that activated a compact boiler. Steam hissed and heated water for tea, filling the room with a warmth that contrasted sharply with the storm outside. Darius watched, arms crossed, eyes following every movement. Avery realized he wasn't uncomfortable. He was curious, almost childlike in his attention. "You seem prepared for this," Darius said. "Not everyone would manage so calmly in a storm this big." Avery shrugged. "Prepared or lucky? Hard to tell in storms like these. You think you can just survive by hiding in a dome. But sometimes the weather doesn't care about luck." Darius nodded slowly. "True. I've relied on tech for most of my life. It feels different when you realize tech can fail at any moment." Avery set down 2 cups of steaming tea and slid one toward him. Darius took it without a word, but the simple gesture seemed to lower a barrier. He sipped carefully, almost savoring the warmth, while Avery leaned back in a chair, letting themselves relax just a little. The storm raged on outside, shaking windows, rattling the walls. But inside, the small apartment felt like a different world, a human sanctuary. Avery found themselves watching Darius more than they expected. Here, away from the office, the authority, the polished suit and sharp edges, he looked fragile and strangely real. A sudden clap of lightning struck close by, making the room flicker with shadows. Darius set his cup down and muttered, "Not much fun being at anyone's mercy, huh?" Avery tilted their head. "Depends on who you're with, I guess." There was a pause, the kind that stretches long enough to make people feel exposed. Then Darius leaned back, eyes narrowing, and said softly, almost a whisper, "Not boss tonight." Avery blinked. It was unexpected. Somehow the words carried weight beyond the playful or casual. They hinted at trust, at wanting to be seen as more than a title, more than a figure of authority. Avery felt a small thrill, not of romance or flirtation, but of understanding. It was rare to see the human behind the power. The wind howled outside, and another spark of lightning illuminated the apartment in a ghostly glow. For the first time, Avery noticed the slight tension in Darius's posture, the way his fingers twitched as if unused to stillness. He was human, after all, not some untouchable figure in a boardroom. And in that moment, Avery understood something important. The storm outside had nothing on the storm of human emotion, the quiet turbulence that could make anyone, even a CEO, vulnerable. Hours passed as the storm battered the city. Avery and Darius sat together talking quietly about the city, the weather, and life after the Great Collapse decades ago, a period when humanity almost lost everything and learned to survive in new ways. Darius shared stories of corporate battles, survival, and the loneliness of power. Avery shared tales of inventions, small victories, and the human spirit that never quite gave up, no matter how bad things seemed. Outside, the city struggled against nature's fury. Inside, 2 humans, so different in status but equal in vulnerability, found a fragile connection. The storm had forced them together, stripped away titles and pretense, and left behind something honest. By the time the first signs of calm appeared, light flickering through the storm clouds, rain slowing to a drizzle, Avery realized that tonight would not be forgotten. Darius had come in as a boss, a figure of authority. He would leave, maybe as just a man, a human, exposed to the storm, reliant on another human for shelter, and perhaps for a fleeting sense of understanding. The storm outside was just beginning to show cracks in its fury. Inside, humanity's resilience was clear, shining quietly in small acts of care, courage, and trust. Avery made a mental note. Sometimes the greatest storms are not the ones in the sky, but the ones that bring people together. And for the first time in a long while, Avery didn't feel entirely alone. The storm had not yet fully passed, though the wind outside had lessened to a steady howl, and the rain now tapped against the windows like cautious fingers. Avery Lynn sat on the edge of their small sofa, watching Darius Kane move around the apartment with quiet curiosity. It was strange, seeing the man who usually dominated boardrooms and meetings inspecting a teapot as if it held the secrets of the universe. Avery leaned back, letting their own feet rest on the coffee table. "You really haven't spent much time in apartments like this, have you?" they asked. Their tone was light, teasing, but not mean. Darius looked up, holding the teapot. "I've seen apartments before," he said carefully. "But I usually don't get invited inside, and I rarely take the time to notice what's in them." Avery chuckled. "Well, this isn't exactly a palace. It's just home, safe from storms, mostly." They gestured toward the window, where the city lights blinked through the drizzle. "And tonight it's safer than being outside." Darius set the teapot down and walked to the small kitchenette, examining the array of gadgets and small devices Avery had strewn across the counter. He picked up a tiny drone, turning it over in his hands. "You built this?" he asked. Avery nodded, eyes lighting up. "Yeah. It's one of my latest projects, supposed to help inspect city infrastructure after storms, detect broken lines, and report hazards. I still need to work out a few bugs." Darius raised an eyebrow. "Impressive." He paused, as if weighing his words, then added, "It's human, not just machine-made cleverness. You thought about people using it, not just building it." Avery felt a small rush of pride. That's the point. Machines are useful, but humans are unpredictable. The best inventions help humans, not replace them. Darius didn't respond immediately, just set the drone down and moved to the sofa. He sat across from Avery, leaving a space between them that felt wide, yet closer than the distance between any CEO and employee should be. He sipped his tea quietly, as if testing the warmth. Testing the human connection he usually ignored in favor of efficiency. "Tell me something," Darius said finally, his voice lower, quieter than Avery had ever heard in the office. "Why do you do this work? You're good at it, obviously, but why risk so much just to help the city?" Avery considered the question, taking a slow sip of their own tea. The warmth spread through them, calming nerves that had been tense all evening. "Because someone has to," they said finally. "Humans have survived worse than storms, and sometimes helping others survive, that's worth more than anything else. Even a promotion or a pay raise." Darius nodded slowly, eyes on the steaming tea in his cup. "I've forgotten that sometimes," he admitted. "We get so caught up in efficiency, in numbers, in control, that we forget why it matters in the first place." The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken truth. Avery didn't say anything, just watched him. There was something vulnerable about Darius in that moment, a side of him no one in the office ever saw. A sudden gust of wind rattled the window, and the lights flickered. Avery jumped slightly, and Darius's hand went out to steady the small coffee table between them. "The storm isn't completely done," he said softly, "but it's less threatening here, I think." "Yes," Avery replied. "Inside humans still have the edge." Their tone carried a hint of humor, but also certainty. Technology could fail, storms could rage, but humans had resilience, adaptability, creativity. Darius's gaze lingered on Avery, and for a moment, the office power dynamic vanished. He leaned back, exhaling slowly. letting himself be just a person, not a boss. "You're brave," he said quietly. Avery laughed lightly. "Brave? Or just reckless?" "Maybe both," Darius said. There was a pause, then he added almost as a whisper, "And smart. You're smart, Avery." The compliment was simple, but it carried weight. Avery felt a flicker of warmth, not from the tea, not from the heater, but from the human connection forming in the small apartment. They had never expected this night to feel personal or meaningful. Yet here it was, forced by circumstance, shaped by the storm outside. To fill the silence, Avery moved toward the small kitchen again, pulling out a few simple ingredients. "I can cook something," they said. "Not much, but warm. Should keep us going until the storm passes." Darius didn't move from the sofa, just watched. "Go ahead," he said. "I trust your judgment." Avery smiled faintly. It was rare to hear trust from this man, someone so guarded, so controlled. They began preparing a simple meal, nutrient-rich pasta with a touch of spice, something to warm the stomach and the spirit. The aroma quickly filled the apartment, mixing with the faint smell of ozone from the storm outside. While Avery worked, Darius reached over and picked up a small toolkit from the counter. He examined a gadget, turning it over in his hands. "This is clever," he said. "You could sell these, make a fortune." "Maybe," Avery said without looking up, "but I prefer them helping people. Making money isn't the point. Survival, learning, improving, those matter more." Darius nodded again, his gaze thoughtful. He set the toolkit down and finally moved closer to the kitchen counter, watching Avery chop and stir with careful precision. It was quiet, domestic almost, and yet strange. Darius, the boss, not dictating, not judging, just observing. The storm outside intensified for a brief moment, a sudden gust rattling the windows. Avery flinched, dropping a spoon with a clatter. Darius moved quickly to steady the counter, his hand brushing Avery's briefly. Neither pulled back. For the first time, Avery saw him as human. Not just a title, not just a suit, but someone who could be startled, someone who could care, someone who could rely on another person. "You know," Darius said after a pause, "I usually handle storms with data, forecasts, and preparations. But this," he gestured vaguely at the window, at the rain, at the chaos outside. "This feels different, realer, more human." Avery smiled softly. "It's because you're experiencing it with another human. Alone, it's just numbers and danger. With someone else, it's survival, collaboration, connection." Darius looked at them, eyes meeting Avery's for a long moment. He exhaled slowly, as if letting go of something he hadn't realized he was holding. "I appreciate this," he said simply. The words were ordinary, but in the context of the storm, the apartment, the night, they felt profound. Avery felt their chest tighten slightly, not from fear, but from recognition. Here was a man who usually carried authority like armor, letting it protect him from vulnerability, now stripped of it. And here they were, both exposed in different ways, both human. Dinner finished quietly. They ate side by side, the storm a constant presence outside, the city flickering like a fragile heartbeat. Conversation was soft, casual, yet meaningful. Darius spoke about his childhood, the pressures of leadership, the isolation that came with power. Avery shared stories of inventions, of city repairs after smaller storms, of small victories that reminded them humans could adapt, survive, and thrive. Hours slipped by unnoticed. The storm outside became a background rhythm, a reminder that the world was wild and unpredictable. But the apartment, with its warmth and light, offered a small pocket of safety. Avery felt something shift, a bond forming, not romantic, not superficial, but real. Connection forged not by choice, but by circumstance, by necessity, by humanity. Finally, the wind outside softened to a gentle murmur. Rain fell in thin sheets, and the distant hum of city life began to return. Avery and Darius sat together in quiet reflection, no words needed. The storm had forced them into proximity, stripped away titles and barriers, and left something essential behind: mutual understanding. Darius leaned back, exhaling slowly, and for the first time in Avery's memory, he smiled. Not the polite corporate smile, not the commanding smile of a boss, but a human smile. Vulnerable, honest, and fleeting. "You know," Darius said softly, almost to himself, "I never thought I'd enjoy a storm this much." Avery laughed lightly, shaking their head. "It's not the storm. It's who you weather it with." The room fell silent for a moment, both of them staring at the window, watching as the city slowly began to breathe again. Outside, humans would rebuild, repair, and survive. Inside, two very different humans had discovered something equally vital: connection, trust, and the reminder that titles and positions mean little when faced with the rawness of life itself. And as the first signs of dawn began to lighten the sky, Avery realized something important. Storms, whether outside or inside, were meant to test not just survival, but character. And tonight, they had both passed the test, not as boss and employee, but as humans. By dawn, the storm had calmed enough for the city's hum to return, faint but persistent. The streets outside were flooded, hovercars stranded, and emergency lights flickered through the misty morning. Inside Avery's small apartment, the air still carried the warmth and comfort of the night spent together. But the calm was fragile, temporary. Avery moved to the window, peering out at the city. "Looks like the worst of it is over," they said quietly, more to themselves than to Darius, who was sitting on the sofa, arms crossed, gazing at the holographic display hovering in the middle of the room. "It feels too quiet," Darius replied. His voice was careful, measured, but there was an edge to it, a subtle alertness that Avery recognized. Darius had lived his life reading threats, predicting moves, anticipating danger. Even now, after a night of shared vulnerability, he couldn't fully relax. Avery glanced at him. "You're not imagining it. Something's off." Darius rose, moving to the console on the wall. With a few swift commands, he tapped into the building's security system. Lights flickered, sensors scanned, and a small alert popped up on the display. Avery leaned closer, reading the message. Unauthorized drones detected in perimeter. Energy scavenging activity in nearby sector. "What are those?" Avery asked, frowning. "Rogue drones," Darius said grimly. "Part scavenger tech, part rogue AI. They hunt for energy sources, usually abandoned or low-security zones. But sometimes they wander into residential areas if they sense power." Avery's stomach tightened. "And you think they're headed here?" Darius nodded. "If the storm knocked out some of the city grid, they'll be searching for power. Our building's small generators might look tempting." Avery's mind raced. The apartment was small, cozy, and hardly fortified. "We can't fight them with weapons," they said, "not without damaging the building, or ourselves." Darius's eyes met Avery's. For a moment, the boss persona seemed to vanish completely. "Then we use what humans have," he said simply. "Ingenuity, strategy, thinking machines can't anticipate." Avery felt a spark of adrenaline. This was the moment they had been waiting for, the chance to prove that human creativity still had an edge, even in a world full of drones, AI, and automation. "Okay," they said. "Let's do it." Together, they moved quickly. Avery fetched a toolkit, improvising gadgets from parts of old drones, wires, and sensors. Darius accessed the apartment's AI system, feeding instructions to reroute power and monitor energy fluctuations. Every movement, every decision had to be precise. One wrong move, and the drones could breach the building, causing damage or worse. The first wave arrived as shadows moving against the faint dawn light. Tiny, spider-like drones, each equipped with scavenging appendages and weak energy pulses, skittered along the building's perimeter. Avery crouched by the window, pointing a makeshift sensor at the nearest drone. "We can't disable them physically," they said, "but we can confuse them, make them think the power isn't here." Darius nodded. "Use their logic against them. They hunt energy patterns, not humans." Avery set up a small electromagnetic pulse emitter. Nothing destructive, just enough to interfere with the drone's sensors. The first pulse caused a small drone to stop mid-step, its sensors twitching erratically. The second pulse made 3 drones spin in confusion, scanning the area as if disoriented. Darius moved closer, adjusting the AI algorithms to create a decoy energy signal. The drones, sensing the false source, turned away from the building, heading toward the empty streets. Avery and Darius exchanged a glance, a small victory in the quiet tension of dawn. But the calm was short-lived. A larger drone approached, a prototype scavenger, bulkier, more intelligent, and clearly not part of the standard rogue swarm. Its sensors glowed a faint red, scanning the apartment's exterior. Avery's pulse quickened. This one would not be fooled by simple tricks. "Okay," Darius said, his tone steady but urgent. "We need a more creative solution." Avery's mind raced. They grabbed a small mirror, a reflective panel from the kitchen, and attached it to a drone arm. "We can redirect its sensors, make it think the energy source is somewhere else entirely," Avery suggested. Darius nodded, his hands moving with precision over the control console. "I'll manipulate the building's energy signals to reinforce the illusion. Together, we can trick it into leaving." It was a delicate dance. The prototype drone moved closer, scanning patterns that no human could fully predict. Avery adjusted the mirror, angling it toward the red sensors. The drone hesitated, tilting its body as if confused. Darius amplified the decoy energy pulses, creating a pattern that suggested a larger power source blocks away. For a tense moment, nothing happened. Then, the drone, clearly misled, pivoted and moved away, following the false signal into the street. Avery let out a breath they hadn't realized they were holding. Darius finally relaxed, leaning back on the sofa, a small smile breaking the tension. "Not bad," Darius said quietly. "Humans still have the edge." Avery felt a surge of pride. Not just for their own efforts, but for the teamwork, the collaboration, and the ingenuity that no machine could replicate. They glanced at Darius, noting how different he looked now, less a boss, more a partner in survival. The room was quiet again, save for the soft hum of the city waking up. Avery began dismantling the improvised devices, while Darius monitored the perimeter, ensuring no other threats approached. The morning light grew stronger, filtering through the mist and broken clouds. "You know," Darius said after a pause, "I've relied on tech my whole life, and tonight, I've seen what humans can do when they're forced to adapt. Creativity, instinct, improvisation. Machines can't replicate that." Avery smiled. "That's the point. Humans survive because we can think differently, act quickly, and adjust. Machines follow logic, they don't improvise." Darius nodded thoughtfully. "And sometimes," he said, almost to himself, "we forget that our greatest advantage isn't power or control. It's ingenuity." Avery felt a quiet satisfaction. The storm, the drones, the chaos, they had forced both of them into situations that revealed strengths they rarely saw in each other. And in the process, the boundaries between boss and employee had blurred, replaced by mutual respect and shared experience. Another alert blinked on the holographic display, a small warning about a nearby energy surge. Avery and Darius moved to investigate, finding a cluster of damaged drones stuck in a flooded alley. Using a combination of mirrors, improvised magnets, and careful timing, they managed to lead the drones away from inhabited areas, preventing further destruction. Hours passed. The city began to stir, emergency crews moving through the streets, hover cars being rescued or repaired. Inside the apartment, Avery and Darius finally allowed themselves to relax. Their bodies ached from the adrenaline, but their minds felt sharper, alive with the thrill of problem-solving and collaboration. Darius leaned back in the sofa, rubbing his temples. "I underestimated humans tonight," he admitted. "I've relied on machines for so long that I forgot what people are capable of. Bravery, quick thinking, adaptability. You've reminded me of something important." Avery felt a warmth in their chest. "That's what humans do. Even in the worst storms, even when things seem impossible, we adapt, we survive, and sometimes we surprise even ourselves." For a long moment, neither spoke. The calm after the storm outside mirrored the calm within. The city was still recovering, but they had held their own. They had faced the intrusion together, combining instinct, intelligence, and courage in ways that no machine could replicate. Finally, Darius looked at Avery, a rare softness in his eyes. "Thank you," he said simply, "for trusting me, for letting me be human tonight." Avery smiled faintly. "And thank you for trusting me. Sometimes even the strongest people need someone to watch their back." The sun rose higher, spilling golden light across the apartment, highlighting the faint puddles left from their storm-soaked arrival. Outside, the city would continue to rebuild, to repair, to survive. Inside, two humans had forged a connection born of necessity, ingenuity, and mutual respect. Darius rose, moving to the window, watching the streets below. "I've been reminded tonight," he said, almost to himself, "that humans are stronger than we think, not because of machines, not because of technology, but because of what we carry inside: creativity, courage, and the will to survive." Avery nodded. "Exactly. And sometimes that strength shows itself in unexpected ways, like in the middle of a storm, fighting rogue drones, or sharing tea in a small apartment." Darius turned, a small smile lingering on his face. "Yes, unexpected ways, but important ways. Thank you, Avery, for reminding me what it means to be human." The morning stretched on, and the storm was finally behind them. The city was battered but still standing. The drones had been redirected, the threats neutralized. And in that small apartment, Avery and Darius had discovered something more lasting than any technological advantage: the reminder that humans, when united by necessity and trust, could face anything the world threw at them. Tonight had tested their ingenuity. Tonight had tested their courage. And tonight had revealed something essential. Humans, despite all the storms, inside or out, always had the edge. The storm outside had fully passed, leaving the city drenched but quiet. Mist rose from the flooded streets, and distant lights shimmered through puddles like tiny stars. Inside Avery's apartment, the air was warm and filled with the faint aroma of breakfast they had prepared earlier, simple, nourishing, and comforting after the long night. Avery sat on the sofa, absent-mindedly fiddling with a small piece of drone hardware, while Darius leaned against the window, watching the city. He seemed different, less rigid, less untouchable. The events of the night had stripped away the armor he wore in the office. Here, he was just a man, and Avery realized that this rare glimpse of his humanity was a privilege, not a right. "You know," Darius said finally, his voice soft and quiet, "I don't usually open up." Avery glanced at him, curious. "I can tell," they replied gently. "And that's okay. Not everyone does." Darius turned, eyes meeting Avery's. For the first time, there was no barrier, no title, no expectation. Just a man who had survived a storm, who had faced danger, and who was human. I've spent so much of my life hiding behind power, authority, efficiency. I forgot what it means to be seen as a person, not a boss. Avery felt a pang of empathy. They had worked for Darius for months, admired him, even feared him in some ways, but never truly understood him. Now, vulnerability hung in the air between them like a delicate thread, waiting to be acknowledged. "You're human," Avery said softly. "You don't have to hide behind a title here. Not tonight. Not ever, if you don't want to." Darius's lips twitched into a small, almost shy smile. "Not easy to remember sometimes," he admitted. He moved from the window to sit on the sofa beside Avery, leaving a comfortable space between them. It wasn't about closeness or distance, just a shared presence. The city outside began to hum with life again. Hover cars hummed over streets, emergency repair crews worked through flooded areas, and distant sirens reminded everyone that life continued, even after chaos. Inside the apartment, the world felt still, safe, and human. Avery decided to make tea again, the warm ritual grounding them both. They moved to the kitchenette, their hands working quickly to prepare the simple drink, steam curling in delicate tendrils. Darius watched, silent, but not idle. He fiddled with a small device left on the counter, a gadget Avery had been experimenting with. "You're always creating something," Darius remarked. "Even in chaos you make things." Avery shrugged, pouring hot water into 2 cups. "It's what humans do. We adapt, we build, we create. Machines follow instructions. Humans improvise." Darius nodded thoughtfully, cradling his cup in both hands. "I've relied on machines too much," he said, almost to himself. "They're predictable, efficient, reliable, but they lack what you just described. The human element, creativity, intuition, instinct." Avery smiled. "Exactly. And tonight proved it. You saw it, didn't you? We faced the drones and they failed to predict us. Humans can surprise even the smartest machines." Darius looked at Avery, a seriousness in his eyes. "And yet I think I've also learned something else." He paused, letting the words settle. "Even when humans improvise, we're stronger together. Trust, collaboration, it matters more than raw skill." Avery felt a quiet warmth at his words. They nodded slowly. "True. We're stronger when we rely on each other. That's what tonight was about. Not just surviving the storm or the drones, but facing them together. And that makes all the difference." For a moment, silence filled the room, but it was not uncomfortable. It was reflective, like the calm after a long night of turmoil. Outside, sunlight streamed faintly through the mist, casting the apartment in a soft glow. Darius shifted slightly, looking out the window again. "I never realized how isolated I've been," he admitted. "Power, responsibility. They protect you, yes, but they also separate you. From people, from life, from connection." Avery hesitated, unsure how to respond. They didn't need to say much. Sometimes listening, simply being present, was enough. They handed him a cup of tea, and Darius accepted it with a small nod. Their fingers brushed briefly, and neither pulled away. "You don't have to carry everything alone," Avery said finally. "Humans weren't built to do that. We survive, yes, but we also thrive when we share the load, when we trust each other." Darius took a slow sip of tea, letting the warmth sink in. "You're right," he said softly. "I've forgotten that." He paused, studying Avery's expression. "Thank you for reminding me." The morning passed quietly. Avery shared small anecdotes from their life, childhood memories, little successes and failures, inventions that had gone wrong, and lessons learned. Darius listened, asking questions, laughing softly at the stories and occasionally adding his own. He spoke of moments from his past rarely mentioned in boardrooms, a childhood spent learning to survive in a harsh city, nights of loneliness while climbing the corporate ladder, and rare glimpses of joy he had almost forgotten. Avery realized how rare this was. Most people never saw Darius like this. Not vulnerable, not human, not approachable. And yet, here he was, sitting beside them in a tiny apartment, sharing pieces of himself he usually reserved for no one. "You know," Darius said finally, "I've always measured life in numbers, profits, and efficiency. But tonight, it feels different, realer, more meaningful." Avery nodded. "It's because you've experienced it beyond the numbers, beyond control. You've seen what humans can do when we're pushed, when we rely on each other, when we just exist together." Darius leaned back, taking another sip of tea. "It's strange," he said quietly. "I've spent so long trying to control everything, and yet the most important things, the human things, I've overlooked." Avery smiled faintly. "It's never too late to remember." Darius looked at them, his expression softer than Avery had ever seen. "I think I want to remember this, not just tonight, but the lessons, the connection, the fact that humans are capable of so much more than they often realize." The apartment fell silent again. But it was a comfortable silence this time. Both of them were lost in thought, reflecting on the night, the storm, the dangers, and the moments of ingenuity that had kept them safe. But more than that, they were reflecting on something deeper, the reminder that connection, trust, and shared vulnerability were just as vital as any skill or invention. Avery set down their empty cup and looked at Darius. "It's okay to let your guard down," they said softly. "Humans are strongest not when they hide, but when they let others see them, even leaders, even bosses." Darius met their gaze, and for the first time, he smiled fully, without reservation. "Not easy to do," he admitted. "But tonight has changed something. You've changed something." Avery felt a quiet pride, not in themselves, but in the shared human experience. They had both survived the storm, the intrusion, and the fears that came with it. And in doing so, they had discovered something more: the strength found in vulnerability, the courage to trust, and the unspoken bond that can grow when humans are honest with each other. The sun rose higher, casting warm light through the mist outside. The city was slowly repairing itself, but the real repair had happened here, in the small apartment. Two people, once separated by titles and expectations, had found understanding, respect, and connection. Darius finally stood, stretching slightly. "We'll survive anything if we remember this," he said quietly. "If we remember the human part of ourselves, not just the efficiency, the control, or the titles. Humans endure because of connection, trust, and creativity." Avery nodded. "And that's exactly what we've shown tonight." The morning continued, the storm now only a memory outside. Inside, two humans had weathered their own storm, the internal quiet one of fear, isolation, and pressure, and emerged stronger, more aware, and more connected than before. And as the city began to hum with life once again, Avery realized something important. Sometimes the greatest storms are not the ones outside, but the ones that bring people together. And tonight, in a small apartment, two humans had discovered that together they could face anything. The storm had finally passed. New Delhi was drenched, mist rising from streets and rooftops like ghosts of the chaos that had raged only hours before. Hover cars, once grounded or scattered, now hovered cautiously, returning to service. Emergency crews navigated flooded streets, repairing damage and rescuing those stranded. Life, as it always did, began to rebuild itself. Inside Avery Lynn's apartment, the atmosphere was calm, almost serene. Sunlight filtered through the misted windows, casting a gentle glow over the small, tidy space. The apartment smelled faintly of tea and the remnants of breakfast, a simple reminder of human warmth after a night of fear and improvisation. Avery stood at the window, gazing at the city below. Their mind wandered through the events of the last 24 hours, the storm, the rogue drones, and the moments of vulnerability shared with Darius Kane. For the first time, the boss who had seemed untouchable, distant, and commanding was just human, and the realization left a lingering sense of calm. Darius moved behind Avery, his presence quiet but steady. "The city's waking up," he said softly, his voice carrying the weight of observation, not authority. "And so are we." Avery glanced back at him. "We've survived quite a night," they said, smiling faintly. "I don't think either of us will forget it soon." Darius nodded. "No, we won't. And I've realized something important. Humans endure because we are resourceful, courageous, and adaptable. Machines can calculate, predict, even fight. But they cannot improvise like we do. They cannot feel. They cannot connect." Avery's heart warmed at his words. It was the essence of everything they had faced together. The HFY truth. Humanity's strength lay not in its technology or power, but in its ingenuity and spirit. "You've always been good at this," Darius continued, glancing around the small apartment. "Not just surviving, but thinking, reacting, adapting. Tonight proved it. I've relied too much on machines, too much on systems, and not enough on people." Avery shrugged lightly. "Machines are useful, yes. But humans always have the edge when it matters most." The two of them fell into a comfortable silence, listening to the faint hum of the city below. The storm had left damage, yes, but it had also left a lesson. Survival wasn't just about power, tools, or technology. It was about collaboration, trust, and the ability to adapt under pressure. And tonight, those lessons had been made tangible. Darius moved to the sofa, sitting down with a slow exhale. "You know," he said quietly, "I've spent so long focused on control, on efficiency, on numbers, that I forgot what it means to be human, to rely on someone else, to trust, to care." Avery joined him, sitting on the edge of the sofa. "And yet, here you are," they said, "seeing it, experiencing it, recognizing what humans can do when we face challenges together." Darius turned to look at Avery, eyes softer than they had ever been in the office. "Thank you," he said simply, "for reminding me, for trusting me, for showing me that humans can overcome anything, not just because of technology or power, but because of ingenuity, courage, and connection." Avery smiled faintly. "We've both learned tonight. I've learned a lot about you, too. About how even the strongest people need someone they can rely on. It's not weakness. It's human." The words hung between them, comforting and true. The storm outside had tested their resilience, creativity, and courage. Inside, it had tested their empathy, understanding, and trust. And they had passed, not just individually, but together. A sudden chime from the apartment AI broke the momentary silence. "City grid stable," the AI reported. "Storm impact minimal. Emergency services operational." Avery laughed softly. "The city survived. And we survived." Darius chuckled, a rare sound, unpolished and genuine. "Yes, humans have survived worse, haven't we?" "Yes," Avery said, their voice calm and certain. "And we'll survive worse again, because we adapt, we innovate, we connect. Tonight proved it." Darius leaned back, eyes drifting toward the window, where the city glimmered under the rising sun. "I've underestimated humanity before," he said quietly. "Not anymore. Tonight reminded me what it means to rely on people, to trust, to face challenges together. Machines cannot replace that. Humans, we endure because of what we carry inside. Avery nodded. Exactly, and the world needs to remember that, especially in times like this, when chaos strikes, when the unexpected comes. They sat together in silence, letting the calm wash over them. The storm had ended, but the lessons lingered. Humanity's resilience was not just survival, it was ingenuity, courage, empathy, and the quiet strength found in connection. Darius's presence, once a source of anxiety and intimidation, now felt familiar and grounding. He was no longer just a boss. He was human, just like Avery. As the sun climbed higher, the city slowly returned to life. Hovercars buzzed along streets, emergency crews repaired damaged infrastructure, and citizens emerged from shelters to assess the aftermath. But the world outside was mirrored by the calm inside the apartment, a space where two humans had faced fear, danger, and uncertainty together and had emerged stronger. Darius finally spoke, breaking the silence. I've spent so long trying to control everything, to plan every step, that I forgot the most important thing. Humans can't control everything, but we can adapt, we can improvise, we can survive. Avery smiled. And thrive. That's what humans do. Survive, yes, but thrive, especially when we face challenges together. The sunlight illuminated their faces, casting a warm glow over the room. Darius looked at Avery, a small, genuine smile forming. Not a bad day, he said softly. Not bad at all, Avery replied. For a long moment they sat together, quietly observing the city and reflecting on the night. The storm had left destruction, but also a reminder. Human ingenuity, courage, and connection were the true shields against adversity. Titles, machines, and power were secondary. It was the human spirit that endured. Darius stood finally, stretching lightly. We'll face more storms, he said. But I feel ready, because we've proven tonight that humans can do more than survive. We can adapt, innovate, and overcome. Together. Avery nodded. And we will. Storms, machines, challenges. Nothing can stop humans when we trust and rely on each other. The city outside had fully awakened. People moved with purpose, repairing, rebuilding, surviving. But inside the small apartment, a quieter, more lasting victory had been won. Two humans had faced danger, uncertainty, and vulnerability, and had come out stronger. Darius looked at Avery one last time, his voice soft but firm. Tonight wasn't just survival. It was a reminder. Humans endure because we are creative, adaptable, and capable of connection. That is what gives us the edge. That is why humans will always prevail. Avery felt a warmth spread through their chest. They had faced danger together, trusted each other, and proven the essence of humanity. The storm, the intrusion, the night of fear and improvisation, all of it had led to this: understanding, connection, and hope. Humans do endure, Avery said quietly. And we'll keep doing it, no matter what comes next. Darius nodded. Yes. And we'll face the future knowing this truth. It's not just strength, not just skill, not just technology. It's humanity itself. The sunlight grew brighter, warming the apartment, reflecting off puddles outside, casting golden light on everything it touched. The city would rebuild, recover, and thrive. And inside the apartment, two humans, once separated by titles and roles, had discovered the unshakable truth. Human ingenuity, courage, and connection could overcome anything. They shared a quiet smile, a mutual acknowledgement of what had transpired. The storm was over, the city was alive, and the world, fragile and unpredictable, would continue because humans, resilient, creative, and courageous, had faced the challenge together. And for Avery and Darius, this calm after the storm was more than relief. It was proof that humans would always endure. Not because of machines, not because of power, but because of what they carried inside. The spirit to survive, adapt, and rise above every challenge, together.